Like, this should be a good one, right?
Yeah.
Cleveland and New York, as you see with some of the statistics here, the Cavs 51-31, the Knicks, 47-35. Cleveland is looking at just, offensive points per game. They're number one. Defense efficiency, this is like points allowed per 100 possessions. Number one, 107.7. So really good defensive squad. They shot well from the floor, 48% is top five, in the NBA, and the Knicks too. They were pretty good offensively. You see the offensive efficiency mark there, number five, points per game inside the top 12. I think a little bit better from beyond the arc, shooting some threes. But the Cavs here to win the series, minus 200 favorites, and the Knicks plus 165. This one should be really entertaining. What do you think about this series, Zach?
So I actually think this is going to be a relatively quick series as well. And a big part of it is that there's a question mark right now surrounding Julius Randle and his ankle injury. But even if he was fully healthy, I still think I would be taking the Cavs in 6 to close it out in the Garden. Like, I think people are overlooking this Cavs team just a little bit in this series because, there's a lot of Knicks fandom out there, and to their credit, and Coach Tom Thibodeau, like, they really got it rolling down the second half of the regular season. But this Cleveland team has 4 guys who have been all-stars over the last 2 seasons, and neither team is particularly deep. So I do think the Cavaliers are probably a year away from being a true contender in the East. But they are the sleeping giant. And like I compared them on the FTN NBA podcast to the Warriors the year before they won their first title, when they pushed that really good San Antonio team to the brink in the second round. Like, it was like, oh, like, these guys are going to be something to be reckoned with down the road. And I think that's what Cleveland is in terms of the big picture. But right now I've got Cleveland in 5. And that 4-1 series score is plus 380 on DraftKings. So I think that would be my pick for this 4-5 matchup out east.
Oh, I love it. Plus 380, 4-1. Yeah. And if you want to be a little conservative, maybe just the Cavs to win, in 6 is the 2 games there, plus 105 over at DraftKings. Okay. So easy work for Cleveland. I didn't realize how great defensively they were. Like, I knew they were really good, but like looking into their numbers, just to pull up some of these previews, is like, oh wow, number one, all right, good squad. And Donovan Mitchell, like, how impressive this guy. I feel like every team should have been calling Utah to see if he was available, and it's Cleveland that came away with him. And I think he's like probably a guy that you're going to be talking about in So Rare, right? Maybe throughout these playoffs.
Yeah, no question. And especially like those guys that you think are going to get through to the second round are good cards to have in your collection right now. And like on the NBA side of things, if we're dipping back into So Rare, the cards that were in your scarcity collection, those limited cards, rare cards, etc., those get a 15% boost in these playoff tournaments. So if you already had a pretty good collection, you're getting rewarded for it. So I unfortunately don't have a Spider Mitchell in my collection, but if I did, he's a guy that I would certainly be rolling out in some of these lineups.
Okay. I don't want to get too deep into yet. I mean, I want to get your predictions at the end, but let's just kind of fast forward here into the East. So, whoever, Chicago, Miami, whatever. We got Milwaukee moving on. We got Philly moving on. We have Brooklyn moving on here. So let's fast forward Philly and Boston. If that's a matchup that we see, who do you give the benefit of the doubt to in that series?
Again, I'm going to be a bad guest and be a little boring here. I am completely chalky in my Eastern Conference bracket right now. I've got Boston and Philly. I've got Milwaukee and Cleveland, of course. And I've got the top 2 seeds advancing to that Eastern Conference final. Again, if Robert Williams is not right, that is going to help Philadelphia immensely because Boston has plenty of bodies that they can throw at a guy like Joel Embiid. But to me, you need Robert Williams and Al Horford. Those are very clearly the top 2 guys, because if you don't, then this is not a matchup where you can get away, in my opinion, with Grant Williams against Joel Embiid. Like, Grant is great in his own right. He has random, awesome defensive games against guys like Giannis, which, that could be a factor in a potential conference finals matchup. But if the Time Lord is not right and you're having to break glass in case of Blake Griffin or Mike Muscala or guys like that, that's where I think Philly could get that advantage. But again, assuming health for these teams, I think Boston is still just a little bit too talented for the likes of Philly. But that certainly, to me, would be the more entertaining series compared to Cleveland and Milwaukee, where, again, I think Cleveland is about a year away, and I think Milwaukee has a little bit of an easier time in their potential second-round matchup.
I feel like the Bucks are just the most complete squad in the league. I
Yep.
really do, man. Across the board, a couple years removed from winning. I said it off the top of the show. You had called that on this show. You talked about the Bucks.
Down
You took that
0-2.
leap forward. Yeah, and down 0-2. You still doubled down on it. Like,
Yeah.
but before the playoffs had started, you said, "Listen, the Bucks are ready." It's been a couple years of like disappointment in the playoffs. I heard Giannis talk about. There was a report the other day that he was thinking about retiring because the pressure was just too much for him.
Yeah.
But they were able to get by down in that series. You were still like, I love this team still. I like their chances, and they did come back and beat the Suns. I feel like, yeah, they're the most complete squad. Even with Jay Crowder, man, like that's an underrated pickup.
I agree about Jay Crowder. I'm just going to shift focus back to that Cleveland-New York series. We just got news. Julius Randle still limited in practice and not taking contact yet. So again, Cleveland in 5 plus 380. I love that pick right now.